I was attending an admin conference, not an IWP conference, but a different admin conference several years ago. There were some presenters on the stage who were, I'm going to say, making fun of executives for not knowing what gate they were flying out of at the airport and making jokes at the expense of executives. They wouldn't be able to tie their shoes if they didn't have me as an admin. And that was kind of the tone around the panel discussion that was happening on stage. And at that time, I was an executive. And so as an executive sitting in the room, number one, it was super off-putting to feel like I was the butt of the jokes in the room. And the audience was... Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Desk Admin Advocates. I am super excited about this episode. I have a very special guest attending with me, and we are really, really excited to talk about and maybe do a little bit of a deep dive into our Partnership Playbook. So I will actually allow you to introduce yourself as my guest.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with you, Melissa. So, hi everyone. I think I know a lot of you, but my name is Cason, and I am the executive administrative partner to Melissa Mahoney. So, thrilled to be here to unpack the partnership playbook and all the great resources or opportunity we think that it gives the profession. So, yeah, just glad to be here and ready to get into it.
We are super excited to talk about the Partnership Playbook because we actually modeled a lot of that content as we were developing the content for the Partnership Playbook around mine and Chris's partnership and just some of the key barriers, key issues, key challenges, and some of the successes that we experienced in our partnership journey, and sort of infused that into our first outline and our first draft of what we think some key components needed to be for that partnership playbook work. And so it's great that the two of us are here talking about that content now that it is fully baked, and that content is available for you all to actually use in your own partnerships. We wanted to maybe do a deep dive on some of the maybe more, we'll call them intense sections in the playbook, some of those issues that can get a little sticky, to be real honest, between an executive and an admin. And so I think I would start first, as before we maybe dig into those specific content areas, is to give you an opportunity first, Chris, to just talk about some of the ways that you see our partnership reflected in some of the content of the playbook.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. I think, really for me, it's the cohesion that we have worked at building around shared, whether it's deliverables or objectives. I think many times it can feel in partnerships or in some of the dynamics of an executive and an admin that the admin is there to execute on all of the tasks that support an executive, which is true. But I think we've really, really, tried to focus on a shared outcome. So, whether it's work we're doing with the board or whether it's a project like this with the partnership playbook, it's really a we approach to the work. And I think that's really, I know for me, it has helped me to recalibrate and refocus when I get very mired in the details and the logistics of all that is administrative partnership. That is always kind of the glue, I think, that holds us together. And, of course, as you know, as we meet weekly, we have things that are really shared objectives, and we talk through a lot of the nitty gritty of what is it going to take to be able to reach this goal, or, to partner with these external vendors or what have you. So that
Yeah,
would be my take on it.
I completely agree with that. And I do think, that's one of the challenges to partnering is, we all know that there's some sort of common, whether that's a common goal, a common middle ground that you find between an executive and an admin. There's some sort of focus or central theme or thing that you're trying to achieve or accomplish. And both people, both parties have different responsibilities or roles in terms of how we contribute to that goal, and finding ways to create the we in those spaces where you have two totally different objectives, perspectives, role, responsibility. I think empathy is what I will highlight first as one of the maybe stickier topics that we address in the partnership playbook. And empathy has to be present. Like, it is a non-negotiable in terms of finding the we in those spaces where you're definitely, you are operating from two very different perspectives, two very different lanes, but you're focused on some common theme or goal or objective. And in order to do that and do it well and do it in a space of partnering, empathy has to be present. And I love the approach that we took with the partnership playbook was, number one, all of the sections have some sort of anecdotal access to a real life issue. And we've embellished some of these stories, but we've taken a lot of those stories from real life stories of executive and admin experiences out in industry and in business. And we've given you some access to, like, here's what might happen in an environment, and then here are some tools to either build trust or figure out how to give feedback better, or in this case, how to access empathy in spaces where your singular experience feels like a primary and or a very extreme or emotional experience, because we all have them. We all have those moments of tension or conflict or just maybe even misunderstanding what's happening in someone else's ecosystem or what's happening for someone else in a specific moment that's creating or causing a behavior. Being able to access empathy in those moments is a game changer. And it's not easy. It's not something that you can just say, oh, you just need to be more empathetic. Okay,
Right.
how do I do that? How do I literally access empathy in a time when I myself am also experiencing something dramatic or something that feels very weighted and heavy? How can I access empathy in those moments? And I love the approach that we took in the playbook, because I think we actually give you access to how you can make that happen. But what I will say from my perspective is, regardless of how many tools you have, how much knowledge and learning you have around it, it takes practice. So it really is about, like, once you access the content, how am I going to make a commitment to keep practicing real empathy, which it revolves around asking questions, being really curious, maybe stepping outside a little bit, figuring out how to disrupt your own uh, emotional responses and or your own processy that is going to occur when you're in a tense moment. What would you say in terms of empathy and just the level of importance it carries, and maybe even our experience, because it to no one's surprise, it was not something that just on day one we had in our partnership. We definitely had to work at it. So what would you say comes up for you in terms of empathy and how important it is?
Well, definitely, it's important, and to your point, I think we definitely have worked at it, and it's a continual process to really understand each other and where we're coming from, and not just, I would say, the titles and the role and responsibility on paper, but what really makes Melissa tick or Chris tick in the ways that have meaning and impact. And so I think that we kind of stay in that process of really trying to understand what is happening. It's not about necessarily diving personal lives to great depth, but more about just kind of understanding the whole person versus just the job that needs to be done or this needs to be taken care of by this date. Like, there's been times I think we've asked questions to each other and to others about whether deadlines or something, like, does this even make sense anymore? And I know from the admin perspective, it can be very scary, or you have some trepidation around challenging a due date or something that feels like it's very much set, because it should be that way. And so I think all of that kind of plays into just being empathetic to what is on your executive or vice versa admin's plate, but also where they're at, in their, capacity, or maybe something's going on. So I think just the continuing to ask questions and be curious, I think has really served us well. And I hope that is ref- it is reflected in the partnership playbook, but I hope it will be an entry point to other partnerships to really get in there and try it out. Because to your point, it doesn't just come naturally. And I think what is naturally for us is our inclination to default to more of the structure and hierarchy and the responsibilities. We can dive into the work, but the human side can easily get lost, or, that can be the uncomfortable space. So,
Absolutely, and I was thinking as you were sharing that perspective, one of the things that I think happens specifically and uniquely to this executive admin relationship is that we make these assumptions that executives should behave, act, feel, they should always have it together. They should always be prepared, be on, be, available for PR, or, often the executive is somewhat external facing. They're required to be on, whether that's in board meetings or in, client meetings or whatever the role is. They're expected to have it together basically 100% of the time. That's just a very common expectation that we have. And on the admin side, similar expectation, but more behind the scenes. Like the admin is expected to have completed all of the things to make sure that their executive can show up on, ready, prepared, have all of the things that they need to do whatever it is they're doing. And the reality is, and we know this to be true if we really think about it and inspect it, but we don't often actually acknowledge it. We know that's impossible. It's impossible for any human being to have everything together. I almost said a bad word. To have all of this together 100% of the time. We know that's not possible. And in fact, it doesn't happen even 80% of the time for most humans because life is real. It's hard. It's messy. We know that. And yet, I think we move in such a space where we have these societal expectations, we have business expectations, we have, all of the expectations surrounding both of these professions. And when you put them together, when you're lacking empathy and you're not showing up 100% your best self 100% of the time, you two are the ones who get to see that most frequently. And so when you access that, it can get kind of ugly, to be honest, when you see behind the curtain and you're not seeing the person for the human they are. You're seeing them through a lens of fault, blame, judgment. Well, now you're going to make my life harder because you didn't do XYZ, as opposed to a curious approach, an empathetic approach that is more human centric, that does acknowledge like something must be going on. And how can I support this? What can I do to show up in a space where, I'm not feeling 100%, so they're probably not feeling 100%. There's a mindset shift that really is required in order to truly access and access empathy, and you're never going to get it right 100% of the time. I will say in a space of vulnerability, we don't get it right 100% of the time. There are moments where I think we have to stop ourselves, and I'll speak only for me, but where I have to stop myself from creating a narrative or assuming some sort of intention that I have zero evidence to support. It's just because I'm frustrated or something I'm experiencing is contributing to that narrative. That happens so frequently, and we often ignore it. Like we dismiss it, we let it happen. We let that narrative sit and soak, and then we move on with our day. But what happens when you actually commit to inspecting that? So it may not be that you're stopping the narrative from happening, but what happens if you stop and inspect it? What can you gain from that? And how does that change how you approach a conflict or approach the tension that exists when, let's be honest, someone else fails to show up in the way you expect them to, or they don't follow through with something you're expecting them to do on both sides of this relationship, the exec and the admin. That happens on both sides.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about a real current example of that in our partnership where there was a meeting that I was supposed to schedule and totally did not have it on my radar. And you asked me about it, and I really honestly, because of, not to make excuses, I really didn't see it. And so I say all that to say I hear you. It's those type of situations that pop up that can really grow and fester because, you know, and even the ownership and responsibility you place on yourself, like, oh, I'm a bad admin or I was incompetent here, all the things that kind of contribute to that when you're doing all this other amazing work. So I think that's also part of it. And I also would say I love that we have created in the space of empathy permission to take care of ourselves as we need. So you and I, you more so than me, but have a heavy travel schedule. And there are days that, or weeks that your schedule is like packed. And so from the part that I play, yeah, of course, nothing is that urgent necessarily that I have to, you know, come to you if you need a day to recharge or whatever the case is, and you've extended that same courtesy to me. So I think that's really important, giving room and space for the human side. And the empathy is in that, yeah, we're not going to be able to run all the time at this high of a level. It's not sustainable. So if we can start to build in um, empathy for our partner and their workload, their stress load, their travel load, all those things, then I think we'll definitely be better for it, and it will enhance our partnerships.
100%. And I've shared this story, I think probably on a prior season of the podcast, but I think it's worthy of highlighting again. I was attending an admin conference, not an IWP conference, but a different admin conference several years ago. And there were some presenters on the stage who were, I'm going to say, making fun of executives for, not knowing what gate they were flying out of at the airport, and making jokes at the expense of executives. They wouldn't be able to tie their shoes if they didn't have me as an admin. And that was kind of the tone around the panel discussion that was happening on stage. And I obviously, I at that time I was an executive. And so as an executive sitting in the room, number one, it was super off-putting to feel like I was the butt of the jokes, in the room. And the audience was, incredibly engaged in that content and felt, um, there was a lot of laughter and sort of cheering on the vibe in the room. And it really got me thinking, number one, I was a bit it was off-putting as an experience as an executive in the room. But number two, it really got me thinking, what is that? Number one, why do we need to do that? And number two, what are we missing in the room? And to me, it's empathy. I think it truly speaks to a lack of empathy for what the executive must be experiencing if they literally don't know, what gate they have at the airport. And that actually fed into some of the content we added to the partnership playbook, because when you actually inspect what's going on for the executive, you discover like there's a reason why they don't have the capacity to remember their gate at that moment. And it has to do with the level of responsibility and or other things that they're required to remember in that moment. And on the flip side of that, I will ask admins all day, every day to consider how they would feel if they knew that there was a room full of executives who, at their expense, were like, they can't even calendar, a meeting that I thought of it as you were sharing the meeting that you missed, which it happens. Like we have so much information coming at us. I don't feel any sort of way about that. I would feel some sort of way if when I asked, you didn't acknowledge that, oh my gosh, I didn't even have that on my radar. I missed it. I'm on it. I've got it. If you had responded differently, I might have felt some different sort of way. But what if I had taken that and used that to then talk to my fellow executives and say like, "Oh my gosh, he can't even calendar a meeting, that comes through the inbox."
Mhm.
You wouldn't want that to happen on your side. We certainly shouldn't I mean, we should have that same approach on both sides of the partnership, and it seems like something so silly and simple, but it's not. It actually has a lot of depth and meaning to it, and I think we both sides carry equal responsibility in this partnership to access it, which is also something I felt in that room, like, they're executives. They should know better. They should do better. They should be better because they're the executive. Well, when we're talking about, like, basic human-centric things, everyone carries equal responsibility for how we show up as human beings, and I think that's what empathy it levels the playing field. You share equal responsibility for it as me. We carry the same level of responsibility into the relationship around accessing empathy, which I think is an important part that we tend to get maybe misaligned on when we're thinking about executive admin relationships.
So true, and even the fact that we were been talking about that nobody has it nailed down or, completely dialed in. It's a constant work in progress. So even acknowledging the fact that collectively you're working at demonstrating empathy for one another, I think is an important shared objective and goal. And into your experience that you've had with that particular conference and admins, I mean, it's there's so much good work, quality, deep work that is being done in the administrative profession that I know that was several years ago, but I hate that that was the focus, even to talk about, this very small thing, which is an important thing, but there's other important things that I think bear a heavier conversation. So that's just, that's something for another day. But I just think that if we're spending more time around the things that actually matter, we might have less opportunity to, be petty, if you will. So
Absolutely. Yes. I know we're running short on time because that's what we do. We just tend to blab away. But I do want to get to, I think, the meatiest content pillar inside of the partnership playbook, and the one that is the trickiest, to me, is one of the most valuable content pillars because I think we give you some language and some real tangible ways to access a difficult conversation between, and I'm especially talking to the admins here, but honestly, both sides. It's an equally uncomfortable conversation from the executive's perspective and the admin's perspective. And what I'm referring to is the section around compensation, investment, and professional development. And that section really digs into how to talk about admin compensation, how to talk about the spread and the just how we view investment in an administrative professional's, not just professional development, but just their role in general and the value that they provide to the executive office. And I'll start by saying our approach there has always been that the administrative professional is not subservient. It doesn't sit below or beneath the executive office. It is actually an extension of the executive office. And when you change your paradigm, just that approach changes how we talk about compensation and how we talk about investment. And that's not an easy thing. So there's a lot of other sections in the playbook before we get to this section, and that's by design. But I did want to make sure that Chris and I talked about that section because it is the stickiest one out of all the sections. This is the conversation that's the hardest one to leverage. You're talking about how do I address that I feel like I'm undercompensated for the contributions I have, and we give you some tools and some ways that you can access that conversation in a meaningful way. But I want to give you an opportunity, Chris, to talk about from your perspective, either experiential or anything that you would want to share about that specific section of the playbook that is from your perspective.
Yeah, I think, for me, that particular section, I love it because it's strategic, and that may sound, foreign when you're talking about compensation, especially from an admin's perspective. I think my colleagues in the profession, we haven't always approached compensation strategically. But to what you mentioned earlier, when we know we're being undercompensated for the contribution we have, you start to, it can start to build resentment. And so how do you approach that? I think the partnership playbook does a good job of having the conversation, being willing to have the conversation. It may not change overnight. It may not, oh, I got this, $15,000 bump up, but what would happen if you asked about it, but approached it in a way that wasn't just, I think I should make more, but really is about, here's what I'm seeing, here's what you know is available to me now, what I'd love to see happen, here's my goals. I think that's really important when you talk about, it may be a 2 to 5 year plan that you're saying, by this year I'd love to be in this particular job grouping or band or however that works for your organization. But that's what I really love is just the approach to it in a way that it is intentional and it isn't just a it's time for a review. And so now um, I want to talk, merit or anything of that sort. But I will say it also, the onus is on both sides. That's why there's the merit of this section to really, as the admin, you're going to have to do your due diligence throughout the year to really capture what are those contributions that you're referencing when you talk about higher compensation. What other data is available out in the business world? So I think there's that particular there's a project mindset almost there when you come into the conversation with, here's what I prepared and here's everything. And all of my colleagues in the profession speaking to you, you definitely can do it because you're already doing it. All of us, you have varying certificates and certifications and all the things. So you definitely can do it, but it is a muscle that you have to strengthen. And I think that this resource, the Partnership Playbook, will help you and help us all to do it.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned it is almost a project approach because it truly is, and if you have that mindset going in that this is not a one and done conversation, you may not get all of the things that you ask for, or you may not even have access truly. Like the beautiful thing about bringing that project together between the executive and the admin is you get to inspect what's happening in both environments. So there might be barriers to your wish list that you didn't even know existed in the ecosystem inside of your company or your industry. And so understanding what those barriers are and knowing where's the room here? Where do I have space to play? Is it in the professional development space? Because that is also investment. So if they're willing to spend $5,000 on your professional development every year, that is part of your compensation package. That is part of the investment that your executive is willing to make on you continuing to grow your career. And not to say that that should trump or supersede compensation because compensation is incredibly important. Real compensation like your salary and your benefits, um, it's an important part, but it's all of it. Like looking at all of that holistically, and the partnership playbook gives you a project-based approach on how to review that and look at that and enter that conversation in a way that is non-threatening, which I think is really important, and is also open, more curious than it is demanding. And I think that's also a really important part of what this can give you access to. You can prepare for that conversation all day, every day, um, but it's still going to be a one-sided preparation. The playbook gives you two sides. Both sides are preparing for this dialogue in different ways. And I think that is unique versus other compensation conversations that are happening where, you're taking your evaluation or all of the things that you've documented, salary, you've done research on salaries, and you're bringing that's very one-sided. And what I love about the project approach, again, I'll highlight that because I think that was brilliant what you said, um, is it's both parties. Both parties are invested and interested in actually uncovering where the opportunities are to keep you engaged, ensure that it's fair, it's equitable from both parties' perspectives. And that is not black and white either. So your version of fair and equitable and my version of fair and equitable might be different. And this gives you access to figure out, like, where's the common ground here? Where can we find a pathway where both of us feel that we've been heard, we've been seen, we can feel really confident and comfortable moving forward on this path, and you feel, as the admin, your contribution is being valued and is actually being recognized for what you're contributing.
Absolutely. It gives, both sides an opportunity to make a very informed decision, because I think, you know, to what you said earlier, you have to come to it open and understanding like the type of organization that you're with, or what are the constraints around salary increases, or things of that nature. I mean, even in our situation, I live in California, which a lot of folks will know is a very expensive state. So if I was coming into the conversation with just like, here's what is possible to make, and I'm judging my employer through the lens of other like California based employers, well, yeah, it's going to be very different. And so, for me, it's always been a conversation around, yes, appropriate compensation, which I will say I feel like I'm compensated very well, but also understanding that IWP is a nonprofit, and we are approaching everything in a way that is, actually sustainable. And so, yeah, it's not maybe where I can make the most money, but in terms of impact or contribution and or professional development opportunities, some of those other things, how important is that to me? And when you look at priorities, and all of that is kind of baked into the approach to compensation, I think. And you may find out it really is a discovery, a path of discovery, because you may discover, hey, I'm doing pretty good. I actually have a lot of the things that are important to me that are non-negotiables. Or I do need to eventually look somewhere else. If I know my organization can never meet my dollar amount that I need based for this particular type of role, then maybe maybe you're looking elsewhere. All of that is part of it. And I think even in that scenario, I think after having done all of this work together, if that's where it ends, I think everyone can respect and support whoever in that conversation, if someone's departing or doing something different, because you've done it based on something that is actually, concrete and isn't just purely emotional.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to wrap, which is I was thinking the call to action. I mean, the call to action is buy the partnership playbooks and do the work. But the call to action, from a more personal perspective is understand that, and we've used this word so many times on the podcast, you're probably sick of hearing me say it, but you do have the agency here to make a choice or prioritize and then make a choice based on your priorities. And that might look like this isn't the place for me. This isn't the place where I can be fulfilled, that I get all of my needs met, and no one's ever going to have 100% of their needs met. But when you do that prioritization, if compensation is at the top of your list and you know you're never going to achieve that at your current company or organization, the choice you have is to reprioritize or find some place that will actually meet and match your needs. So you have the agency to do that. And when you do it in the space, and this is repetitive of what you said, Chris, but when you do it in the space of thoughtfulness and the type of structure we've created in the partnership playbook to reach that recognition and that realization, everyone's going to respect. They may not be happy about it. They may not treat you, the ways that you always want to be treated as you make an exit, but they will respect that. They will understand and respect how you got to that choice and that decision. And at the end of the day, it is you have the agency here to ensure that you have what you need. That this is going to give you access, hopefully, to gain it in your current role with your current partner or potential partner. But if that doesn't happen, this will only set you up for future success, because as you're on that search for the place that will meet your needs and fulfill your needs, you're going to have done all of this work around partnering, and that will become a non-negotiable for you, which will just raise the bar for your own expectation of what can be achieved in a future role. So I think if we leave you with a call to action, buy the partnership playbook, but also, really engage with your own agency around your future, your career, your development, what investment looks like, and what your priorities and non negotiables truly are.
Agreed. Yes, and I think you're gonna love it. If you haven't read it, go out and read it for all the reasons we mentioned today, but so much more. So it's really a gift to the profession, and I hope that everyone will take advantage of it.
Yeah. So thanks so much for joining me for this. And I know, Chris and I will be talking about the playbook off and on. Hopefully, we'll have some opportunities to get in front of some live audiences to talk about the playbook because it is very near and dear to our hearts. It is a gift to the profession. It's a long-standing body of work that IWP and that I personally have been dreaming and envisioning for many, many years. And so to have it, it's real. We have the books. They are real and ready for you to purchase and really start diving into that content. That's super exciting and fulfilling for us. So we hope that we will have access in some future state where Chris and I can kind of be on the road and talk to you about some of your experiences with the content. So that's kind of future focused, maybe 2027 hashtag goals for 2027 is that y'all get access to the content and then we get to actually hear some feedback from you about your experiences in it. So appreciate you being with me today, Chris, and we will see you all on the next episode. So thanks for joining us today. See you later.